Hey everybody, Jeff Yalden here with one of my favorite school counselors ever, Mrs. Beatrice here in Newtown, North Dakota. So what I'm doing here is I've decided that getting young people to speak amongst their peers is a pretty impossible task. So we decided that we're going to give out index cards, and when I come visit, you ask any question you want, and I'm going to do something new, teen mental health, I don't know, conversations with Jeff or something. And if I can sit down with the school counselor and kind of continue the conversation from the assembly, that'll be a great thing. So I'm starting off with one of my favorite, Miss B. It's 7:45. We started, 8 o'clock this morning?
Yep.
And we've been meeting with kids all day. I'm so privileged to be able to share. So we got some questions, and we're going to answer them, and we hope you get something out of it. The first question: what would you do if you were put in a bad place, like a bad place in your mind? And I was kind of thinking about this. The first thing is you're able to acknowledge it, you're aware, but then I also want you to identify what maybe this is. And then I always want to say, who is your significant adult to be able to talk to? And so if you're in a bad place in your thoughts, remember, thoughts are thoughts, who can help you identify what this is, and who can help you kind of move forward as a result? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Do you have anything that you want to add to this?
So sometimes what I think about when a student puts it this way is, they might not have the language to be able to say what their real issue is.
I always say that they have trouble. It's not that they don't want to talk, they don't know how, and maybe that's the language.
Right. We have a lot of language barriers between our generation and our younger generation right now, because the language they use does not necessarily mean it the same way that we grew up with in the definitions, right? But when we talk about a bad place is a bad place. It's somewhere you don't want to be. And a bad place in your mind, it could be that we have a student who's dealing with anxiety. It could be a student who's seen a traumatic event and they're dealing with PTSD, but it's not been diagnosed. It could be a student who deals with trauma daily in their lives. Or it could just be someone who watched a film and can't get that particular film issue out of their head. So what we need to do is, as you said, we need to acknowledge it, and we need to identify what's causing it. So sometimes we can figure out what the bad place is if we can figure out what the trigger was that put us there.
And so, I want to end this question with, have the courage to ask the question, and the answer shall come. But you have to have the courage to want to know why.
Yes.
And that's okay. You're not alone.
Or just the courage to ask someone and be willing to talk to someone about it and let someone discuss it with you. Because a lot of times, especially teenagers, it's not cool for them to ask questions. It takes them out of their social pecking order that we have them in, right, by society. If they suddenly develop the freedom to come talk to an adult about a problem, their peers are going to give them a rough time about it. So I as a counselor, and not all of every counselor is going to want to do this, but I happen to be a single person and my children are grown and raised. So I make sure that I'm available until after practice time at the school, because some of the students will come see me after practice to talk to me about what's happening, because nobody else is around for them to see that they came in to talk to me.
And so as we're doing this video for Newtown, one of the things that I like having you here is I want the kids to know you are here, you do care, you want to help, and that the door is open for them.
Yep.
So here's the second one. I am a gray area in a world that hates gray areas. And so again, I love that this person is aware. Mm-hmm. They're asking the question, I want them to, let's identify what exactly this is. Who is that trusted adult? Let's explore. Are they confused? Are they lost? Are there expectations, frustration, anxiety, stress? But know that it will be okay, but you have to come forward and start talking about what this gray area means.
Right, because a perfect example of not understanding, right? If you just explain it as a gray area, we might not understand what you're talking about. But in today's society, that gray area could be that you don't fit in the preconceived notion of what you should be like. So one of the issues that this particular student could be dealing with is an identity issue. Maybe they're in our LGBTQIA plus demographic, and that is a hated demographic in so many ways, right? And they don't like the fact that they can't identify the same way as their peers, and they're maybe afraid that their peers aren't going to be welcoming.
What's so valuable about this is, as I'm reading it one way, but having you here, you're able to give a different perspective. So it's like we're giving two answers to one question.
Yeah, hopefully.
Oh my gosh. And so, yeah, if you are that student struggling with your identity and being supported, that's the gray area. Again,
Right.
you're not alone. Who is that person that you feel comfortable going to? And don't be afraid to talk to that person. We can't help if we don't know.
And another thing that could happen is we have a demographic population that's changing here in our area, right? So while we are still a large percentage of Native Americans, we have Hispanic students coming in and some African American students coming in, and that could make them a gray area as well.
Right.
Because their demographic population is not represented well here, and they don't fit in with the other one, and it's how do I fit in and get to be true to who I am and true to my culture. And so this is one of the things we're discovering in research, is that we have to include the culture of the students we teach in what we teach, so that the students feel welcomed in the classroom. I love the fact that our Native American Essential Understandings exemplifies that with going into classrooms on the Lakota Sioux reservations and saying the white students identify with grandparents, how many of you have grandparents? And the Native students don't identify with that because they don't call them grandparents necessarily. So he'll say, how many of you have an unchi, which is Sioux for grandmother,
Yeah.
is my understanding. And if I'm wrong, I'm sorry, I apologize, but that is my understanding of what I've learned from this gentleman. So we have to sometimes remember that we have to ask that question. Are all of our students in the same demographic population? And then maybe there might be some gender issues. But if they're not all in the same demographic population, the gray area could be that difference that they're not feeling culturally recognized in their classroom. And that's something that, teachers in the past didn't have to worry about, but now we talk about being culturally sensitive to help our students.
The other thing too is I am a gray area. And that says to me, like, maybe you're confused or you feel like you're different, you don't fit in.
Mm-hmm.
I want to make sure that you matter.
Mm-hmm.
It is okay we're still searching and trying to get to know who we are. Don't ever be ashamed of you. And don't be ashamed of your journey in trying to figure this out.
And one of the hardest things for teenagers to understand is that they don't have to impress everybody. They have the freedom, and they need to allow themselves to be who they are. And a lot of times, because of the peer pressure, they're afraid to be who they actually are.
And I love you and will validate you. Bam. I don't think I found a purpose in life. I mostly feel numb. I am on antidepressants and have been diagnosed with anxiety. I just know that I want to be successful for myself. How do you find a purpose? What I want to say is, first of all, I don't know many teenagers that know their purpose. It's okay. So you say, I don't think I found a purpose in life. It's okay. It is okay. I want you to be present. I want you to do the best you can. I want you to show up every day. The purpose is going to happen. I mostly feel numb. That is what concerns me.
That's the one that concerns me too, because I want to know, are you feeling numb because that's the effect of the antidepressants you're
That's what I
on?
was going to ask.
Or if you're feeling numb because you don't know how to explain some of the feelings that you're having, or if the numbness is because we need to have a talk about a more serious issue, because you're separating yourself and you're breaking off and you're isolating and you can't deal with some sort of pain you're feeling.
Yes, and I'm concerned about what that could lead to if you don't come and ask
Right.
for help.
And with a student who has anxiety, that numbness could be almost anything. It could be what is causing the anxiety. It could be that the issue that caused the anxiety has also caused the numbness.
So one of the first things that I want to say is I mostly feel numb. Could this be you feel numb as a result of starting the antidepressants? If that's the case, number one, we need to talk to your parents, or you need to talk to your parents, or the doctor who prescribed this.
Right.
Come to your counselor or trusted adult, because if that's the case, we need to wean you off the antidepressants properly under the care of a medical physician, trusted adult that can help. And then we can deal with the anxiety, maybe journaling and trying to figure this out. I just know I want to be successful for myself. That could be some of the anxiety.
It could be.
Let's not worry about finding a purpose yet. Let's try and figure out this numb, because that could be a greater issue.
Yep.
And the medication, I think you're doing really well, and I think you are going to be successful. But here's another case. Please have the courage to not answer these questions by yourself. Find that person, trusted adult.
And it doesn't always have to be the school counselor. I mean, some of the kids aren't comfortable coming and talking to the school counselor, and that's
Sure.
okay. Because I know that I have students who have a different safe adult that sometimes when they're having issues, they don't want to talk to me, but I know who their safe adult is, and I will take them to that safe adult.
So what can they do if they're like, I don't know who to talk to?
Then we find out, and that's, they talk about building relationships in schools, and it doesn't mean you have to be your student's friend. It means that you need to know about your students and you need to know who they can connect with. And I think a lot of first year teachers struggle with that. I need to be their friend is what building relationships means. But it doesn't, because it doesn't benefit your student for you to become their friend.
Right.
It benefits your student to become their mentor, to start to understand what some of their issues are, where they're coming from. And when we talk about where they're coming from, we don't just mean where they are with their reading levels and their math levels.
Exactly.
We mean what's their home life? What are they dealing with? Are they struggling with something else? Are they struggling with identity? Are they struggling with coping because they have no coping skills?
Problem solving, the issues with parents' expectations.
Right. And so a lot of teenagers are dealing with that expectation, that parental expectation, and the expectation that they need to be perfect. My father is a perfect example. Tells my daughter, who's raised in apartment buildings, go mow the lawn. Did not take her out and show her how to use a lawnmower. Just told her to do it, and when she didn't do it, yelled at her and told her how incompetent she was, right? Whereas what she needed, all she needed to help her was for someone to teach her how to use the lawnmower. And then she could do it. So she calls me in tears. I show up. I take her outside and I show her how to use the lawnmower, what to do when it chokes out, what to do with the stuff. But my father's expectation was she would just go do the lawn instead of the expectation of teaching them how. So as adults, we have to remember they might not have been taught something, right? So they might show up in our classroom, in our school, and they might not have the skill that lets them be able to acknowledge what kind of feelings they're dealing with. And so we have to teach that to them. So I keep a feelings chart on my wall, even though a lot of people consider that more elementary. And I'll say,
Not at all.
okay, we're having trouble talking about this. show me, go up to my feelings chart and put the picture frame around the emotion that you feel is the best. And it's got this little cute character who's making funny expressions, right? So it's easier for them to identify it by the expressions on the character if they don't know the words or the language for it.
Know too that having the courage to come and speak to that significant adult here at Newtown, or if you're at another school listening, we care more about you, your overall well-being, than your academics. So don't ever be afraid. This is part of learning and growing up. This one is tough.
Okay.
I tried suicide 3 times. It didn't work. Who can I talk to about it? Okay, this is one of the things, it hurts my heart, because here's where, are we helping or are we hurting? This clearly says, I want help. I don't know who to talk about it. I'm scared. I want to thank you for sharing this. I tried suicide 3 times. It didn't work. Okay. We have a crisis here that I want to breathe. I want you to breathe. Who can I talk to about it? I want to encourage you to right away find a trusted, significant adult, a friend who you value, a parent. You need to reach out immediately. I don't want a 4th time. I don't think this is the answer. I think you want help. It's okay. What do we need to do to listen to you, to give you the help that you need?
Our big question becomes, how do we keep you safe?
Yes.
So what do we need to do to keep you safe?
Like a safety plan?
Like a safety plan. And not a plan that an adult makes for them, but a plan that the student makes with an adult.
Yes.
Because it's got to be something that's going to work for the student. So it's knowing who can you call and have, I had someone word it this way and I loved it. Who is that 4 a.m. friend?
Yeah.
That person you can call at 4 a.m. and you wake them up and they aren't angry with you because you need them. Who is that person in your life? And as a teenager, that's the best way to think about it. Who is that person you can call at 4 a.m. in the morning when maybe you don't feel it's your parent, maybe you feel it's a friend, maybe it's an uncle, maybe it's an aunt, maybe it's the neighbor across the street, but who is it that you feel is going to have your back if you talk to them about this and is going to help you? And I wish it would be me for every one of my students, because I have a niece who's a suicide survivor, and I lost a nephew to suicide. And the nephew didn't talk to anybody, and the niece didn't, but she sent a text message to her mother, which I am so grateful for, because her mother looked at that text message and said, I don't understand this. This one doesn't make sense. So she checked on her child, and so we were able to save her. And now she advocates for coping skills. And she comes here and she speaks with our students every year in the health classes.
Yeah, I love it.
About coping strategies to help them. How can they cope? How can they work so that suicide is not the plan or the option? But that being said, this child has opened the conversation.
Yes.
This child has said, okay, I've tried it. Suicide is on my mind. So this is a child that needs to have someone have a serious conversation with them. And we need to find that turning point, that thing that makes it worth. So what is their protective factor? Does the child have a pet they really care about? Do they have younger siblings that they're responsible for that would help them want to stay here? What is it that's going to want the student to stay in life, in the present? And we talk about in the present because it's a day-to-day for the rest of your life struggle. Because you're valuable. You're a human being. You're here for a reason. You you are a valuable person, and don't ever let someone tell you you're not, because that's not true. That you have value and you add to society and you add to the life around you. So there is a purpose for you to be here always.
Absolutely. And I also want to say this. Newtown or any person feeling this way, we can't help you if we don't know. And if a friend knows somebody, if you know who this person is or something like this in your own personal life, know this. See something, say something, know something, do something. Don't ever take these matters into your own hand. Have the courage to talk, and you could just say, I need help.
And if you're the friend of somebody who's thinking this way, you are not a snitch because you come and talk to an adult about it. What you are doing is you're showing that person, and they're going to be angry at you. I mean, that's the truth. That's because they're hurting, they're in pain. They're going to be angry, but you're showing them that you love them and you care about them by going to get them help if they're not willing to get it for themselves.
And those words like promise me and don't tell anyone is really that individual saying, I need help, but they're having trouble admitting they don't know what to do.
Right.
So you're right. You're not a snitch. You're saving a life.
You're saving a life.
The next question, I don't exactly have a question on teenage life, but I have a question on how you do what you do. How do you help so many without even thinking about your problems? How are you so good at what you do? How do you do what you do? I think over time and getting to know who I am and being okay with who I am, I think this has just become my purpose and my passion that's overtaken my dream. How do you help so many without even thinking about your problems? We talked about this earlier. Addressing my problems, admitting that I'm part of the problem. This has become my passion through my experience. And the more I'm able to talk about it, the more I'm not avoiding. I'm helping others with theirs as I work through mine too.
Yep.
How are you so good at what you do? Thank you. But this kind of makes me think about, I'm not perfect. Perfection doesn't exist. We all start somewhere. Oh boy. Oh wait, I do have a question. How do you know when your life is meaningful? Or how do you know when you have a purpose in life when you're so clueless right now? All right, this is what I love. Mm-hmm. I'm 48. How do I know if my life is meaningful? Because you just wrote me this question. And being clueless right now, you're not. This is a high school student that wrote this, that is aware and is thinking outside the box beyond. I'm 30-something years older than this person. I've got goosebumps because they're asking the question. Mm-hmm. I love it. Everything that you said about being alone hit my heart hard because it was true about me. I listened and it made me rethink everything about myself. What I like about this, they're already doing the work and they don't know.
Right. This particular student is not only aware of the fact that they're struggling to deal with whatever problem they're dealing with, but they're also aware of the fact that they're recognizing people who have the skills. Now we just need the student to come forward and work with the people that have the skills.
I think this person gets it.
Yeah, I think so.
I love it. I'm inspired. What is the best way? This one is tough. Mm-hmm. What is the best way to deal with your family doing drugs? The best ways to cope with it and how to handle the stress that comes with all of that. Number one, I want to encourage you to ask for help. You can't do it alone. This is a very serious issue, but understand, whoever you're talking about doing drugs, they are going to want to have to quit on their own. And you should not be expected to have to deal with family living and doing something illegal, and that's unhealthy for you to be a part of it. So you need to talk. we need to give you coping skills. And I'm afraid that a lot of kids think that if they come forward, then we're going to tell, or they might go to the hospital, or the police are going to get called. What would you say about, this is one of your students? This is tough.
It's more than just an issue for our students. It's an issue across societies because the drugs are so prevalent. And a student who has a family member that is doing drugs and wants to help, that's the frustration of the fact that the family member won't listen to you. Sometimes it puts the student in a difficult situation. It could possibly be a dangerous situation because we don't know what drug you're talking about or how the person reacts to that may be on the drug. We just know that the student is saying, I have stress because I'm dealing with a family member who's doing drugs.
This is traumatizing.
It's very traumatizing to a student. It's very traumatizing to a child. It's traumatizing to other adults. Any of you who have ever dealt with an alcoholic in the family, you know how traumatizing that can be. And that's the one that people talk about when they talk about a dysfunctional family and drugs. Alcoholism is always what comes up. But this could be somebody doing something as simple as marijuana. For me, that would have been dangerous if my family was doing that because I'm horribly allergic to it. So that would have been even more significant. Excuse me.
Well, yeah, no problem. So I think the biggest thing is it's okay to come and talk to someone. Let's talk about coping, problem solving, and trying to figure out what you can do best. The big thing is we want to make sure that you are safe and help answer some of the questions, because if you're doing drugs to cope with something, then maybe we need to find a way to help whoever is doing the drugs to feel better. Can we develop other coping skills, problem solving skills to feel better, but in a more healthy way? So I think the first thing is we need to get comfortable talking about it, and it's okay. The next question, how come she wasn't strong enough? How come she wasn't stronger enough? I'm kind of thinking that this was about someone that may have ended their life by suicide. And the question you're asking is, why weren't they strong enough? Strong enough maybe to ask for help, strong enough to take a time out, strong enough to be more resilient. My friends, not everyone is strong. I think strong is also being courageous enough to say, hey, I need a timeout. What I want to say to you is the more you and I are comfortable being uncomfortable having these conversations, I think the more we're going to give people permission to ask for help. And if we can get people the help that they need or give them the hope, I think little by little we're going to develop the strength to be strong and resilient through the tough times, recognizing that what we are going through is temporary. The next question, how can I overcome an addiction? How do you tell somebody they need to stop doing drugs? I don't know if this is you speaking on behalf of yourself or a friend. I want you to understand addiction and the person, we have to separate the two. Let's love the person, but let's also understand the addiction is stronger than the person. So whoever is under the influence and is addicted, they need help. They cannot do it on their own. How do you tell someone that they need to stop doing drugs? Again, I speak from your heart. Let them know that them doing drugs, how is that affecting you? You care, you love them, and maybe like if this is a family member, you engage the help of other family members. And maybe if it's at that point, we might need to do an intervention. So again, this is something where as a teenager, you're having to deal with these adult issues. And I'm not sure it's really fair that you have to deal with these adult issues, but a lot of teenagers are having to. So I want to invite you again, talk to someone that can help you breathe. Let's look at the big picture. You're not alone, my friends. What is emotionless? Emotionless means that you lack emotions, which basically means you lack the ability to feel, and that could be trauma, pain, but there's more to it. Do you lack the ability because of maybe trauma in your life? Do you lack the ability because of rejection, abandonment, pain that you've been through? It's a good question, but I'm not sure where the question's coming from. Why are kids nowadays so suicidal? Teen mental health is something that is much different today than it was ever before. I think there's much discussion that we can have about this. I think there's the feeling of alone, isolation. Isolation is toxic. I think it's a lot of being on social media and our smartphones and not being involved. It's the feeling of disappointment and being a burden. I think also it's the fear of the unknown or putting too much pressure on yourself to have to be perfect or to fit into this model that everything we see online is kind of encouraging to us to have to be. So, why are kids nowadays so suicidal? I don't think kids want to die. But I think in the here and the now, they see the solution to their problems can't be solved. And they think, what's the point? So perfection. And I also think the suicidal is kids are exhausted today for having to be so on all the time. The question...
Our students, teenagers today have much more stress than we did when we were growing up. They have tremendous expectations put on them from the minute they hit middle school. Some elementary kids suffer with stress issues because of expectations. I always told my daughter, if you get a D and you did your best work, I'm not going to be angry with you about getting a D. But you've got to be able to honestly tell me you did your best work to get that grade.
Right.
And then I'm fine with it. But if she tell me that she got a D because she didn't even try, then we had an issue.
Right.
But one of the things that we're dealing with in society now are the trolls. The people on social media, the trolls who, if a student makes a post about feeling alone or feeling like they're a burden to somebody, the trolls that will go, just go ahead and kill yourself, on social media. And so teens, police yourselves. Get rid of some of those anonymous apps. Take them off your phone. Because those people are not really your friends. They're people you've never met, and you don't know. It could be somebody saying they're 13 and they could be 67. Or it could be somebody in a foreign country who has an issue with the United States. You don't know why they're saying what they're saying. But unless it's somebody you honestly know that you've had a heart-to-heart with, why are you taking their advice?
Right.
But this is happening to our children. We have children who are being pressured by their classmates to go ahead and kill themselves. I've heard that in school.
Yep.
That's bullying. It is very much so bullying. And that's where you need to file a bullying report. If someone ever tells you you should just go ahead and kill yourself, that is your right there to come into the counselor or your teacher or your principal or someone and say, hey, I'm being bullied. And the North Dakota Century Code has changed to where schools are responsible for it off grounds as well as on grounds.
That's the first. So North Dakota is holding schools responsible for bullying being off grounds as well as...
So the state of North Dakota is saying, as a school, because the expectations have changed, right? That schools are the places that nurture children, et cetera, et cetera.
Wow.
So our expectations is that we're going to be dealing with the bullying. So whether it's happening off ground or on ground. Now that doesn't mean that it takes the parents out of the equation, because the parents have to deal with this. The parents, you should be open to listening to your children if they're telling you something like this, instead of saying, oh, just get over it. Because a child who's being told to go ahead and kill themselves is not going to just get over it.
Right.
We need to deal with the fact that someone is telling them that. Someone is abusing your child by telling them that. And you as a parent should be justifiably angry about that.
Absolutely. And so I think, you said, let's close our circle.
Yeah.
And let's not validate ourselves by the likes that we get.
Right, exactly. So social media, while it's good, it's opened up avenues for some things. They're showing, clinical studies are showing that it can help with depression by connecting you to others.
Absolutely.
But at the same time, too much social media usage can cause depression. So it's got to be a balance. But part of the ways it causes depression is because of these people you don't know, and sometimes the people you do know that are not very nice say things that they wouldn't say to your face.
Right. It's easy to hide behind a screen and say things.
It is very easy to hide behind a screen and pretend to be someone else. I mean, we know that there are people who do that all the time, that hide behind a screen name, that pretend they're somebody that they're not on social media, because it's easy to do. And our children are very open about who they are. I love it in the movie Easy A. The teacher says, why do I want to know that you just went down to the gas station and bought a Coke Zero? Right? Our children don't think about privacy. They don't think about it that way. They're like, I'm only sharing with my friends. No, if you're posting something online, you're sharing it with the world, and you're sharing it with the world in a way that they can repeat it over and over and over again. So you need to think about what you're putting online.
Absolutely.
We don't need to know you just went to the gas station or bought a Coke Zero, because I, as an adult, am going to ask you, well, if you were at the gas station at 10 a.m. buying a Coke Zero, why weren't you in class? Right? Now we're dealing with truancy. We're dealing with issues like that. But at the same time, you can still have social media use without having to tell everybody all your private business.
That's right.
You don't need to put it all out there, because in a way you're creating some of that vulnerability that you don't want. Because if you're out there, while at the same time though, sometimes you get help because you post something, right?
Right.
Your support group rallies around you. But other times you let those trolls in. And those trolls, they don't have to be a friend on your account to be able to comment on your account always.
Right.
The social, you have to control that through your privacy settings. So like if you're on Facebook and you don't want trolls being able to comment on something you post, you have to make sure that you have that setting for each individual post set to how you want it, friends only.
Yeah.
Which means then you got to think about who your friends are. Are your friends 500 people?
Well, it's about likes when we're young. That's the validation.
Well, yeah, it's partly there. It's also partly what's causing the narcissism in society that we're seeing more and more of. Because how many times do you need to take a picture of yourself in the school bathroom? I really am trying to understand that one. I don't want people to know I'm in the school restroom, much less taking a photo of myself in there.
I like to look at social media now as like, if it's positive, if it's encouraging, if it's beneficial, if it's inspiring, anything else, you know what? I don't know. You open yourself up too much to be judged or criticized, or you're letting the trolls
or
come
flame warred.
Yeah. Remember
you have
this.
An opinion.
You matter. It doesn't matter. I've said that too many times today.
Well, it works for you.
I guess so.
It works for you.
A lot of children in today's age think it's cool to be depressed. They tell everyone they are depressed. Even when they are not, they joke and make fun of the whole situation. This is kind of interesting. When you and I were talking about this, it's the situational versus the clinical depression. And the situational, I'm going to let you kind of help me with this. Situational versus clinical.
Okay, so when people talk about depression, everybody thinks that it means mental illness and that's what it is, totally and 100%. And it's not. Depression can be caused by situations you're in and situations that you're dealing with that are out of your control. For example, a divorce, right? That is out of a child's control, but that doesn't mean the child isn't depressed and dealing with it.
Like adjustments.
Right? So maybe you moved your child 3 times in one school year because we were in a recession, or there was an act of God or something that destroyed the home you were in and you had to move. We don't know why people move 3 or 4 times a year, but some people do and they have to. I had to do it myself once in my life. That was not fun. Part of it was because landlords weren't being responsible of the properties, right?
So there's always a situation.
So there's always a situation that can cause temporary depression.
Yeah.
And so we call that one situational depression because it's caused by the situation. It's something you can recover from with coping skills. Then we have what's called clinical depression. Clinical depression is a depression you're not going to get over. It's something you're going to deal with. And it's not caused just by a situation. This may be a chemical imbalance in your brain so that you have to medication.
The neurotransmitter is not connected with the neurons. This does not mean you're crazy.
No, it does not mean you're crazy. It could be because of what your ACEs scores are, what the trauma is in your life. It could be because you've been in the military as an adult and you have PTSD from what you've seen. It could be because you're sensitive to material. So if you're constantly exposed to material that you're sensitive to, like think about a small child who's constantly exposed to violence on television. In the 1970s, you see, I'm dating myself, but in the 1970s, we protested that and had violence removed from primetime television. So what did they do? They put it into the commercials because commercials come under the Freedom of Speech Act.
Oh boy.
So even though we fought and we got laws passed that violence could not be on prime time when children would be watching television, they found a way around it, right? So if you think about horror films now, the most graphic parts of the horror films are in the trailers on television.
Right.
So our children are constantly being inundated with this. So they're inundated with graphic violence, right? Degradation of human anything is not valued in a lot of the video games. The lovely ones where you can be a single person shooter and just go shoot people up, right? That doesn't value human life. A lot of those things, doing a lot of those things can lead to depression. So a clue for the teenagers and a clue for the parents is if a person starts isolating themselves, which is not normal behavior for them, it's not because they've been diagnosed with anxiety, but it's a change in behavior. If they start isolating themselves, if they change their habits, if they're no longer interested in things they were interested in before, I would start looking at maybe you need to talk to someone about depression.
Absolutely. And it's like what I said, red flags.
Yeah.
Let's not think we need to be the mental health professional. Let's not self-diagnose our kids. Let's understanding friends, red flags, we do something. But also know this is not a joking matter.
Nope, we take it very seriously.
Depression and sadness, let's not be the ones that determines what is what. Do something.
Right.
I think the first thing, if you're a parent, contact the school. They have resources. If you're a friend, say something. If this is you, the individual, have the courage to say, I need help. I want to talk to someone. Again, we care more about the well-being of our kids than like anything else.
And I like the context that the child is addressing here because they're being accurate, whoever he or she is. There is a culture out there in society that says depression is cool. And that's what we call the emo culture. Emo short for emoting, right? And there's music, there's films, there's literature, graphic novels that all deal with this emo culture where it's all depression and misery and it's dark
so some
and
of this
gloom.
music or the videos
Could
kind of
be
reinforces
adding to it.
that set. So that's like what I talked about earlier, the behavioral activation. If you're feeling this way, let's not do something that continues us to feel this way. Let's change it and do something else that makes us feel better.
Right. So, but basically, there's the 2 types of depression, but a lot of situational depression is caused because we don't have the coping tools we need. Or it's because it's something that's totally out of our control that we can't change.
Right. And in the meantime, remember, breathe.
Breathe.
If we can
Definitely
talk,
breathe.
let's find tools to get through this situation.
Mm-hmm.
It might take time.
And as a teenager, we don't always expect you to have the coping skills to handle with these because you haven't been taught them, maybe.
Right.
So sometimes that trusted adult is just the person to help teach you the tools that you need, that you're going to then use the rest of your life.
Absolutely.
And not everybody's tools is going to work for you. You have to find the tools. You have to take the tools out of the toolbox that work to help you.
Right.
So whether that's like playing with a stress ball, or I loved my globby guy. I've got to get some more of those because he developed feet. But whatever it takes that works as a strategy that can bring you to a happier place. And that's not to say that everybody has to be happy 100% of the time, because that wouldn't be realistic, right?
No.
But there are people who are more joyful, and joy comes from, what do we know? What's that big word we've been using the last few weeks at the school? Gratitude.
Gratitude.
Right? Joy
Kind of replace your
comes-
expectations with appreciation. Scientifically, they say being grateful makes you feel better.
Yeah, research studies are proving it.
Yeah.
And I know it's fall back on the research studies, right? But research studies are actually proving that gratitude does help decrease depression. So one of the strategies we're working on teaching our students is how to say 3 things they're grateful for every day. And this is brand new. We're working with a leadership group. We're teaching them. We're also teaching the teachers.
Absolutely.
What are 3 good things a day? So one of the things we've done here is we've added a gratitude wall for our students where they can add what they're grateful for. And we're noticing we have to say, keep it appropriate. But because our students could sometimes be grateful for something and we don't understand what it is because we discover it's in the Urban Dictionary.
Yep.
But at the same time, I like the fact that it's giving our students a voice. It's letting them tell us about things that they like, things that are important to them, and those are things we can then turn around and use as tools to help them with lessons.
And I notice it's hard for some of them. Like
It's very hard.
I have to say this. One of my friends came up. What are you grateful for? And he puts Bob
Yeah,
himself.
yeah.
I'm grateful for Bob. But
And
here's
it's okay
someone
to
that
be grateful for you, though, for yourself.
well, yeah, it is.
Yeah.
But I am kind of sensing that it was a struggle to be able to write down something and to think about what I am thankful for.
Yeah.
That's part of the struggle for our kids, and let's not give up on it. Let's continue to push to find something that makes you appreciate. Like if you appreciate teachers, tell that teacher. You appreciate your parents, tell that parent. You appreciate having a gratitude wall, tell someone. Keep going.
Yeah. So my walls get a little full. By the end of the year, they are definitely full. But I make sure the information gets out there, that it's at them. And it does actually start conversations for me, because sometimes a student sees something on the wall and comes in and asks me about it, and I'm grateful. And if I'm not in a private discussion with a student or working a small group, my door is open.
Always
And
open.
always open. If I'm working on paperwork here in the evenings, my door is open. And the kids know that door is open. They always say, "Are you busy?" We know the realistic answer is yes. Of course I am.
Right.
You know, it never
But
changes. But
never
my
too busy
answer
for you.
my answer is come in.
Yes. And understand, you are not a burden to us. We are
No.
never too busy for you.
No one is a burden.
How do you cope with, oh, I'm sorry, this one, how is mental health that spontaneous sometimes? And it's not.
It's not. No. Mental health is something that happens over time.
And you
It's
might
not
become
something
aware
just
that you might
happens.
not be feeling right. Red flag, you're not feeling right. So it's not that I think it just popped up, like just showed up. I think it's something that has been there, but you're acknowledging that something isn't right.
Yeah, it could be genetic, so then it's something you're born with. If mental health issues run in your family, it means you have a chance of having that same mental illness. It doesn't mean you have to have it, but it means you have a stronger chance than somebody else.
But it could also be something simple like
Right.
your diet.
Yes.
We were talking earlier
Yes.
about if you have sleep apnea, or not really even sleep apnea, if you're not getting the proper sleep, you're angry, you're frustrated,
Yep.
and that can lead to
behavioral issues.
So
Yeah.
I love the fact that we're aware. Let's address it now.
Mm-hmm.
It's okay.
One of the things that society has done to us, without, I don't know if it was intentional or not, but one of the things society has done to us is processed foods and too many sugars.
Yes. Sugar and depression are best friends.
Yes, yes. Sugar, while it gives them energy, it's a depressant. Sugar is technically defined as a depressant because it will drop you. And if anybody who's diabetic knows that, sugar can be deadly, right? So you need to think about the amount of sugar that you as a teenager are choosing to eat. It's in everything. If there are 5 words like sucrose, fructose, aspartame, any of, where you get to 5 big words like that, maybe it's something you should think twice about eating.
If you can't pronounce it, it probably isn't really good.
Yeah.
Like you can pronounce apple, banana,
Right.
pineapple,
Right.
grapes.
And if you're a person who likes sugar, bananas are full of sugar, right?
But that's a kind of a good sugar.
It's a good sugar.
Yeah.
Unless you're like me, you're not supposed to have some of those.
I'm the same way.
But so it's something to think about. The other thing you need to think about is what are the preservatives that are in the food? What's the food coloring? In the 80s, they were working on research that dealt with behavior issues, and they found that some of the kids who had some of the worst behavior, it was because of the diet they were on. They were getting too many of those preservatives and food colorants. So my choice is I shop the outside of the grocery store, and I make everything from scratch if I can. It's very seldom processed food, except I do have to admit I have a weakness for those supposedly natural cheese and cracker things because they fit in my fridge here and I can eat them when I can't get lunch.
Guilty.
Right.
Yeah.
So.
But I like the mental health. Also remember, sleep, nutrition, get more involved.
Yeah.
So.
Yes, a person who is actively involved has. Can't always say it that way. But a person who is actively involved may have less stress than others. Some of us overbook ourselves, and that causes stress.
There's like doing too much.
Yeah. But what they have found is that if you are involved, where you're out, animated, acting with other people, that it's easier for you to deal with depression. But again, you don't want to get yourself so over involved that you're stressed out because you have no time to relax.
2 more questions.
Yeah.
How do you cope with open voids, and in particular, a fear of the ocean? And that is what is thalassophobia, which is an intense, unwarranted fear of the ocean. And we kind of got this off healthline.com, but it could be like deep bodies of water.
Yeah, deep bodies of water. So for our students here, it may not be the ocean, it may be Lake Sakakawea, because, and it doesn't have to be that they've had a traumatic experience on water themselves, so much as they've heard stories, because one of the things I've been hearing about ever since I moved here is those big sea monsters in that lake, and so you shouldn't go in certain areas because these humongous fish,
Or, I get this, because I live in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina,
Right.
and so on the news, we're always hearing about the shark biting tourists.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I'm not going in the ocean.
I don't want to go in the ocean. I don't want any shark nibbling on me.
This is kind of one of those things where you're aware of what your fears are, me, the ocean, sharks. So, and I don't want to be sarcastic or funny about this, but I think it's an important lesson. Don't put yourself in places that you don't feel comfortable being in.
Right. That's a good one.
So you won't see me in the ocean.
But so the other thing we went and looked at this is open voids, right? It doesn't have to just be a body of water. It's any space or area in either public or in private where you develop some sort of anxiety issue because...
To open space.
Yeah. So like, For some people, open spaces could be, the meadow, being out on a ranch, right? Where you don't see objects because they're too far away on the horizon lines, and you're not feeling like you're in control of that space.
Right. And you said this phobia, this thalassophobia, is the opposite of claustrophobia.
It is, in a way. It's the opposite. So it's not, the fear of confined spaces. It's the fear of openness.
Open spaces. So it's real.
So think about it. If you're more comfortable being wrapped up in a blanket all the time, you're probably not going to be that person who's comfortable in a wide open space.
Yeah.
Right? But that doesn't mean that it has to be a fear you have to live with. When we talk about fears, we talk about...
Which leads me to the last question.
Right.
How do you deal with fear?
Right. So we talk about irrational fears versus real fears. And irrational fears are like me going up on the high dive and having the fear of jumping into the water.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you're up on the high dive, it looks like it's twice as far away, right? So it looks... I'm always standing on the side going, why am I so
Well, that's
afraid?
a real fear.
It's a very real fear.
Right. Oh, I
right?
thought we said that was a rational fear.
It's qualified as an irrational fear. And I know that
Why?
doesn't sound right, does it? But irrational fears are fears that you can alleviate, right? So an irrational fear, being afraid of the ocean if you've never been to the ocean,
Mm-hmm.
somebody could qualify that as an irrational fear. But a fear of heights can be a very real fear because you could have had an episode, maybe you're one of those people who constantly dreams about falling, right? Or something like that, so that fear becomes very real to you. But at the same time, you're afraid of snakes even though you've never dealt with snakes, right? So they have counseling techniques called desensitization that I don't necessarily agree with, where like if you're afraid of something, they expose you to it. That would
I'm not a
work
fan
for
of
me.
that. No.
No. So, but dealing with fear itself, you're dealing with your responses. Are you the person who freezes because you're afraid and you can't get your feet to move? Are you the person who has to run because you're afraid? Are you the person who gets very aggressive and has to fight because you're afraid of something? So we're looking at, are we defining the fear? What is it that's causing the fear? Because sometimes it's something that's out of our control.
Right.
Right?
And so then if it's not in your control, what do you do?
So that's when
Number one, breathe.
Hopefully you're breathing, right? Hopefully if it's a dangerous situation, you're getting out of there as fast as you can.
How can you
right?
remove yourself?
Right. How can you remove yourself from a dangerous situation? Hopefully you know all the techniques to not end up in one, but sometimes like you're in a car with somebody else and you're not in control of that again, right?
Breathe.
Yeah, breathe.
Yep.
Try to remain calm. That's one of the hardest things to do because when you're calm, you're thinking. So they explain it this way. They go, okay, so here's the brain. This is the hippocampus, and this is the prefrontal cortex, right? And your brain is sitting like this, and you're in a rational pattern when you can think. But fear does this to us. It flips our brain so that the prefrontal cortex can't operate correctly, and the hippocampus, which is emotions, is exposed. So one of the things you can do when you're in a situation where you're afraid, if it's not a situation where you're actually in danger and you should be afraid, if it's something that you think, okay, maybe you want to convince yourself that you shouldn't be afraid of heights, you can walk across that bridge. Or maybe you tell yourself you shouldn't be afraid of that elevator ride and you're dealing with it. One of the first things you can do is just start asking yourself questions because it makes the brain close.
Give me an example of asking questions.
So you could ask yourself a question like, on the high dive, what was the worst thing that could happen to me? I could do a belly flop on the water, right? It hurts. You get over it. And I use that reference because I was on a swim team and we had to practice dives and everything. And I was that person who wanted to go back down the ladder instead of going off the board, right? And while my coach told me it was an irrational fear, to me it was a very real fear, right? Because it affected me and it affected my emotions. So we can do things like we can ask ourselves questions. Why is it? What do we think triggered it? That's a good question to ask yourself. What triggered that fear? What is it about it that made you feel afraid? Now, my father says to me, he says, when did you get over your fear of elevators? And I said, I haven't. And he goes, oh, well, you don't act like you're afraid anymore. And I said, no, I learned how to breathe. You know?
I learned to breathe and to say it's going to be okay.
I learned how to breathe. So that helps me tremendously. But one of the other things is I learned how to ask myself questions. It's only a 7th floor elevator. So if it's only a 7th floor elevator, that means it's a hydraulic lift, which means if it's going to fall, it's not going to fall very quickly. Okay? Educating yourself on your fears.
Yeah, no kidding. I didn't know
helpful.
hydraulic versus whatever.
Yeah. So anything over 7 floors is no longer a hydraulic lift. Now it's the cables, right? And cables can break, and so we can become afraid of that, right? It can happen.
Yeah.
We know it has happened. But the majority of elevators are safe, they're well maintained, because they don't want that to happen, because that's a lawsuit waiting to happen, right? So the majority of the time you can say to yourself, you can say, okay, why am I afraid of this particular elevator? Is it because I'm afraid of heights? Is it because the sensation? I don't like the sensation of dropping because I have vertigo. And I feel like I have no control of that. Right? So that dropping sensation in an elevator and I are not friends. Right? Which is why I don't do a lot of the rides at fairs and things anymore, because my vertigo does not let me be friends with these things.
Right.
Because when I was a kid, that sensation in your stomach when you hit those little hills was kind of fun, right? As an adult, since it makes me lose my balance and I actually start to fall, I'm not going to do those kind of things.
I agree.
Right?
Yep.
But not every child has the skills to start saying, what is it that made that trigger? Right? We don't know. It may be a repressed memory that's triggering that and making us afraid of that. For me, the elevators, I didn't know I had vertigo yet. I didn't know that until I started, because I was the kid who could climb the 60-foot willow tree and be at the top. Right? And by the time I was 18, I couldn't climb a 5-foot ladder.
Interesting.
Right? So it's like, okay, what happened? Well, in reality, it's the fact that I developed vertigo young. And vertigo is more common in women than in men. And it's more common after age 50. So the fact that I developed it so young was not such a good thing.
Wow.
Right? My niece has it worse than I do. She literally ends up in bed for 3 days with nausea if she has a vertigo attack. But fear and what we do with fear is what differentiates us from a lot of animals out there, right? Because we can learn how to control fear, and a lot of that is like those breathing techniques that we talk about. But a lot of it is also teaching ourselves how to protect ourselves.
So when you refer to animals, go with that one. Isn't that the
The natural instinct in an animal that is afraid is to protect itself. Like a skunk, it's going to spray you.
Yep.
Another animal might run away. Another animal might become aggressive.
So
A
like they're going to react?
Bears are afraid. They're going to attack you,
Mhm.
right? So do I go out in the areas where the bears are? No.
Right.
Because I don't need them to be afraid of me coming crashing through the brush. But so an animal reacts instinctively. Because we're human, that's the wonderful thing about being human, is we have a brain.
We can respond and not react.
We can respond rather than reacting. So we just need to train ourselves how to respond rather than react. And that's simple things, because we can use mindfulness practices starting in the elementary years to teach the kids how to breathe.
Absolutely. First thing
So
is
that
just
if
breathe.
they're in a situation they're not comfortable with, they can calm themselves, with the breathing techniques. At the same time, we want them to know how to protect themselves if it is a serious situation, which is why we practice drills and things like that. Because, I'm sorry, I grew up in Minnesota. I know what a tornado is, right? I'm justifiably afraid of the fact that I don't have a basement.
Right.
If there's a, possibility of a tornado. Just have to deal with it nowadays, but, justifiably afraid. But sometimes we're in situations where we're just afraid because it's instinctive, because while we're human, we are still in that animal chain. And it's just instinctive. And I always say, trust that instinct and go with it. Because if you're walking into something and the hair is rising up on the back of your neck, turn around and get out.
So it's like proceed with caution.
Yeah.
It's okay to leave. Don't put yourself in these positions. Absolutely.
Yeah. And if you're dealing with fear and you want to be able to get over the fear, talk to someone. We are more than willing to help give you some techniques that help you deal with the fear. And I'm not gonna say you shouldn't be afraid of it, because you get a snake anywhere near, doesn't even matter if it's dead, right?
I'm not worried about you. I'm running. I'm running.
I'm not dealing with this
Yep.
issue. And the students all know I'm allergic to spiders, so if there's a spider in the room, I'm like, it has to be dead. And I'm sorry, because I know that the culture here wants to just put that poor little thing outside where it could do its job, but I'm allergic to them.
Well, I'm not allergic, but like if you follow me on social media, you know I'm like a girl. So if I see spiders, a snake, a lizard, I am like on a chair. I'm screaming. So anyway, Newtown. Oh my gosh, we've been an hour. It's almost 9:00 at night. But my friends, wherever you are watching this, I'm Jeff Yalden with one of my besties, Miss B. It's been such a pleasure to be able to answer the questions for your kids with you. And I hope that we can continue planting seeds. Young people, remember, you matter. You got people that love you. We care about you. And we want to do everything we can to see you succeed mentally, physically, spiritually. You guys rock, man.
And there's just one thing I want to say. There is no one answer for everything. So if what we've talked about doesn't work for you, it's okay. There's no one answer.
We'll find something else.
We're going to work until we find something that does work for you.
Yeah. What's one thing you're grateful for today?
I am grateful for your visit again today, because our students love you when you come here. Oh my God.
Oh my God, thank you. I'm grateful that I got to spend all this time with you. But you know what I'm grateful for. There's a few students that
that touched your heart, and that's what it's like in education and working with kids. It's just there's always those ones that are going to just grab your heart and hold on to it and never let go, and then there's going to be the ones that make your heart hurt because it's out of your control. You can't handle it. And
can't take it home with you though.
Yep, can't take it home. So even we have to work on these questions for ourselves. We do every day, because we have to keep ourselves healthy so that we can help our kids.
Yeah, because you can't pour from an empty pitcher.
Yeah,
but you know what?
That.
we planted seeds today.
Yeah.
We planted seeds. Newtown, you're beautiful. I love you. Thank you. Thank you so much. You guys take care.